Welcome everyone, BD Political Geek here. Today we're talking Alberta Teachers Strike. Unless you've been living in Iraq, you're probably already aware the teachers have been on strike for almost 3 weeks, and we're going to get into the details as to what's happening. In fact, we're going to do this in classic Microsoft Word style. So what is the current situation? Approximately 51,000 teachers across the province are on strike. The government is expected to issue back-to-work legislation on the 27th. Teachers have recently rejected an enhanced mediation request from the government on the 16th. This request included some rather suspect requirements about not allowing any sort of cap on class sizes to teacher ratios. And the government has yet to respond to teachers' proposals from September 1st, including details on classroom complexity and classroom sizes. Kind of an interesting situation. Let's dive more into it. So what do the teachers actually want? Well, they want primarily classroom size caps and really some sort of complexity calculations. The ATA, Alberta Teachers Association, estimates that approximately 5,000 new teachers would be needed to fulfill the requests that they have in place. They also want a raise, obviously, because money is good. They want more educational assistants in the classroom to deal with complexity. The main concerns from the teachers publicly are classroom complexity and class size caps. So what about the government? Well, the government of Alberta has a current offer. They are offering to hire 3,000 new teachers, a 12% raise over the next 4 years, or the 4 years since the end of the last agreement. They're offering funding for COVID-19 vaccinations and 1,500 more educational assistants by 2028. What are some of the concerns? Obviously, they don't want a class size cap. The argument here is that there's limited physical space. They're also worried about the cost of new teachers and updated wages. And maybe there's an overall objective to look to more private schools, but we'll get into that more. So what's the deal with the class size cap? Like, what is it? Well, first off, Alberta is one of the few provinces that actually doesn't already have a class size cap in the agreement. Obviously, for these provinces, they already have something. For BC, for example, kindergartens, max 22 students per teacher. Seems kind of reasonable. You can see some other examples here. So what is the ATA, or the Alberta Teachers Association, proposing? Well, they have a lovely little chart put together where they are showing that over the next few years, they will be slowly scaling down the number of students to teacher, allowing the government time to hire new teachers and get people on board and trained. They also have introduced this weighted complexity formula, which is delightful. It allows them to calculate the additional effort that's required for students that are in different categories, such as mild disabilities. If you have a couple of these students, it would add an additional 1 to the class size, reducing the overall class size. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, kind of like it. So, Political Geek, tell me a story about pay. Well, Alberta teachers are actually the lowest paid in Canada currently. The ATA currently estimates the compensation as $8,200 per student. This is about $1,600 below the national average. So according to the ATA Facebook post, a class size of 30 based on teacher wages paid about $16 per student per day. Why did I highlight this? We'll get back to that. Well, this is great, but where do you land, Political Geek? Well, in my case, I'm on the side of the teachers on this one. And you might ask, why? Well, there's some reasons. Let's get into them. So for me personally, I actually have some third-hand information, basically stories that I've heard from other people, about teachers in the Edmonton area, that's where I live, and they have classes up to 35 to 45 kids with 4 to 7 complexity issues. That means that one teacher is handling the equivalent with complexity issues of possibly even 50 kids in their class. Can you imagine trying to handle that many children in a given day? It's insanity. There's just no way it could possibly work. Funding to schools in Alberta also is the lowest across the entire country. There's a beautiful graphic put together by the Teachers Association. They show it quite clearly. Alberta is low on funding. We need to spend more on schools. It's pretty much that simple. Remember earlier I had that sneaky little note about Alberta looking maybe for more private schools? Alberta is actually one of the highest private funding provinces in Canada. Almost 70% of funding for private schools comes from the Crown, comes from Alberta, the government. Other comparables in the country, BC is kind of 35 to 50. Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Quebec are 50%. Ontario and Atlantic provinces are zero funding for private schools. There's also this kind of sneaky thing that we are aware of. Danielle Smith, the current leader of the UCP party in Alberta, has a desire to really shift some of the funding from public schools to private schools. She's very much in favor of a voucher style of school funding. Basically, this is a way of each individual student gets a set amount, and wherever they get schooling, that's where they take the money. Am I in favor of this? Not really. I feel like this is kind of an underhanded way to try to start destroying the current public school system, which, to me, is a big deal. So let's talk about some goofiness that's going on. It's pretty clear both sides are playing games in the court of public opinion. The government regularly calls out teachers not accepting their supposedly good deal. The ATA regularly calls out the government for their refusal to listen or to take action. It's definitely a double-sided battle in the public opinion. But do I really want my taxpayer money funding advertising against the teachers? I kind of feel like that could be spent better ways. And then there's this little gem. Yes, what do we say about this? $30 a day for parents with children under 12. And wait, how much is the government paying teachers right now? Oh, $16 a day. Interesting. Is this some sort of play by the government to encourage people to move to private? Silliness aside, there is actually some legitimate things to talk about here. The ATA very well could be ordered back to work very soon, and this historically has had some pretty bad results. It has a tendency to really sour relationships. So in this case, we're talking the Teachers Association and the government button heads like crazy, and when it comes to the next round of negotiations in another couple of years, you know there's going to be even more hard-fought battles. There's a really good chance, too, that the ATA could actually defy this. Maybe they're willing to pay the fines. Maybe it's worth standing up to the government to say, no, this cannot happen. We cannot let this go. I also legitimately think the ATA could issue legal challenges. Realistically, this is kind of bypassing teachers' rights. How are teachers supposed to stand up for themselves if they can't strike, if they can't walk away from work to get the government's attention and the people's attention? Let's talk about something a little bit realistic. This isn't going to be free. Teachers are wanting raises, legit. Teachers are wanting more teachers to reduce class sizes, also legit. But the government does need to fund this. How are they going to get this? Is this going to be a higher taxes situation? Me personally, I think it's worth it. Higher taxes are probably a better option to pay for this. I'm a father. I want my kids to be educated. So let's talk about this for a second, because I think it's something that's interesting. Alberta has some of the lowest taxes in Canada. If we're talking comparing it to Ontario and BC, they're sort of comparable. Alberta having slightly higher for low-income earners, but a lot less high for high-income earners. BC is a little bit the opposite. Ontario takes a bit of a middle ground, but really, Alberta's got some of the lowest in Canada. Maybe personal taxes need a bump. Alberta also has some of the lowest corporate tax rates in the country. We currently have an 8% tax on companies over $500,000 in income. The next closest is Ontario with 11.5%. We're taking the Alberta advantage maybe just a wee bit too far. If we're going to be able to pay for this, maybe this is an opportunity to bump this up a little bit. This is, I think, where the win is. This is a pretty good opportunity for Alberta to kind of equalize ourselves with the rest of the country a bit and maybe be able to pay for the teachers. Look, I fully admit I'm a little bit personally biased. I am very much in favor of taxing the rich and the corporations. I think they're getting off a little bit light in Alberta. Alberta Advantage doesn't have to be, 2-3.5%. It can be a little bit less and still be an advantage. That's my 2 cents. Well, that wraps it up for today. BD Political Geek here, saying we'll see you soon.